Tyrion, we're definitely lost. I don't understand. This should be the place. The map even has that giant tree north of here. This can't be the city of Ladon that Virgil mentioned. It doesn't look like anyone's lived here in centuries. But Lord Steelwind's directions were pretty straightforward. So why are we... Wait a minute. Did he give us the wrong location on purpose? Please, what kind of dishonourable cretin do you take me for? Lord Steelwind? What are you two standing around here for? The trial will be starting shortly. Wait, this is where This is where we'll be hosting the trial? He's so flabbergasted he can't even speak properly. Yes, the Archduke has always been sentimental about this place. And I doubt a normal courtroom would have it enough... space. What? I really don't know what possessed him to trust you. It's a miracle he's even taking part in this at all. But nevertheless, let's not keep him waiting. Ah. Alright, I guess we're doing this. Not exactly going to be a conventional trial. When were they ever? Doesn't look anything like a conventional courtroom either. Thank you all for coming here today. I appreciate your cooperation with our investigation. Why have you brought us here? This place is filthy. It's crawling with insects and vermin. My apologies, but what happens here today must be kept under wraps for now. I had to choose a location that was away from modern civilization. But nevertheless, I welcome you all to my home. Wait, you live here? I do. Your Grace, I know you wouldn't bring us here unless you were completely certain. But I want to ask you one last time. Is this truly what you wish to do? There will be no going back after this. What? I've made many mistakes in my lifetime. I gave Wyvern the means to protect themselves, but all it did was warp them into something monstrous. I grew bitter seeing what I'd created, so I isolated myself from my people. I thought my best course of action would be to stay in seclusion and leave Wyvern to fend for themselves. I see now what a fool I was. I abandoned my king to survive in an unjust world, but now foreign powers have ingrained themselves in my kingdom, all because of my negligence. Well, no more. It's time the people of Wyvern and their enemies remember who watches over them. What's going on? Okay, I didn't see that one coming. From the weirdest witnesses in the world to the weirdest judge. It's a dragon. Enough! This may not be a court, but I will have order. You're an ancient dragon. No, you're the last ancient dragon. That is correct, Heavensborn. I am the Lord of all lords. You will stand before Rathalon, the Scaled Lord. Age 1203. He's been around a while. What an occupation. Remus Virgile is an alias I assume when I walk amongst your kind. But make no mistake, even in my human form I have always had the strength of an ancient dragon. Until now, only the Lords of House Steelwind and the Kings of Wyvengard have known my true identity. But I will hide no longer. My will alone will determine how this trial ends. I wonder if Rathalon is still alive, like you said. I wouldn't be surprised. Despite everything, our kingdom's constitution still includes him in our government. Wait, really? As the saviour of our kingdom, he was given an honorary position on our political hierarchy. His authority technically rivals that of the king. So that's why you're acting as the arbiter. You're the only person with the authority to convict any and all of the nobles here. Make no mistake, Mr. Cuthbert. I will remain impartial regardless of what transpires here. I will not interfere in this trial, nor will I try to manipulate its outcome. I will only mediate its proceedings, and pass judgment when necessary. Now then, with introductions out of the way, shall we proceed? Of course, Your Grace. The prosecution is ready. The defense is also ready. I guess. I'm sure we're all thoroughly aware of why we're gathered here. But for the sake of doing this properly, could you please list the charges, Lucio? Of course. The defendant, Arya Steelwind, is charged with several counts of manslaughter. Her victims include many knights from the King's Guard who are still unresponsive. And, of course, there's Lloyd von Sanctus and Coraline Sybil, the heads of House von Sanctus and House Sybil respectively. What is this farce? This trial has been over before it began. Lady Steelwind clearly overestimated herself. Even a child knows to be wary of Mage Blight. No, don't you see? This is Bahamut's judgment. The divine powers that be clearly think she is unfit to rule at the King's side. Might I remind the court of my own testimony? I witnessed Beatrice Frigga enter the prayer room before I lost consciousness. Isn't it suspicious that this occurred around 15 minutes before Pierce's death?
Objection!
Okay. If I recall correctly, you only caught a glimpse of her. You don't know if it was someone else disguised in an illusion. You didn't even speak to her. That's all the more reason to call her to the stand to explain herself. She has already testified that she has no memories of what transpired during the massacre. There is no need to drag this out any longer than necessary, Cuthbert. My client has a right to a fair trial, and Beatrice Frigga's involvement clearly implies some sort of foul play. Enough. I find Mr. Cuthbert's request to be reasonable. And I agree that Lady Frigga's actions are quite suspect. Very well, let the defense have his battle. I only hope for his sake that his blade strikes true. Why is everything a war metaphor with you? Beatrice. I'm glad you're safe, Mr. Cuthbert. Not for lack of trying on your part. But that wasn't... I have no memories of what I did. If I hurt you, I am truly sorry. To be honest, I'm still a little doubtful about your memory loss. But I'm not the only one who experienced it. Arya also has no memories of what happened. And how would you know that? Word travels around quickly in the dungeons. What? Regardless, if you truly have no memories of what happened, could you testify about what you do remember? Perhaps there's a clue there we haven't discovered yet. Very well. I was with my sisters and my guide, Eris Ilmater. I was speaking with them in the garden when I suddenly felt ill and lost consciousness. When I woke up, my sisters found me. They said that I had gone missing for over an hour. I was confused, but when I later heard what happened, I realised that someone must have taken control of my body. I have no memories of what happened, and from what I understand, the same thing happened to Arya. And to make matters worse, there's nothing that indicates who may have controlled her actions. Well, I think I know where to go already. But for the sake of pressing some stuff, let's press some stuff. She's been missing since the massacre happened. I really hope she's okay. Oh, make no mistake, she's definitely okay. What makes you so sure? Do you remember anything about what happened to her? No, but it's just a feeling. Enough of your speculation. Tell us what happened next, Trigger. Speaking with them in the garden where I suddenly felt ill and lost consciousness. If they're with you, shouldn't your sisters have noticed this? According to Laffy and Miriam, their pet dog was running amok in the hallways. They left the witness with Ilmater to chase him down. And when the sisters returned to the garden, both Beatrice and Ilmater were gone. Do you remember anything after that? No, I really want to remember, but I can't. She looks like she's being manipulated to me. By the mystical, magical purple. And you have no memories of what happened? No, none at all. I can only imagine what I was forced to do while I was unconscious. Forced? What do you mean by that? Confused, later heard what happened, I realised someone had taken control of my body. So you're also saying that someone else controlled you? Yes, it's the only explanation for why you saw me in the prayer room.
Objection!
Absolutely ridiculous. Arcane magic is not capable of mind control. Or spinning a fairy tale to absolve yourself. Think what you will, but please believe me when I say, no memories of what happened, and the same thing happened to Arya. Your statement does match up with what happened to my client, but you clearly already knew what happened to her. You could just be using that knowledge to fabricate an alibi. I suppose I can't blame you for thinking that after what you saw. Mr. Cuthbert, I know it doesn't mean much coming from me, but I am telling the truth. That remains to be seen. Make matters worse, there's nothing that indicates you may have controlled our actions. Why would you even bring that up? Well, if you had evidence that someone else was controlling us, it would exonerate both me and Arya. Think, Mr. Cuthbert, isn't there? That would be the best case scenario, wouldn't it? Ugh. What? It's nothing. Yeah, because she's being forced to say specific stuff. And unlike most of the people around here, she knows she's being forced to say specific stuff. What are you doing, Eris? Why are you forcing us down this path? Well, I feel like I'm being manipulated here, but I don't have much of a choice.
Objection!
Beatrice, you said there's no indication of who orchestrated this. But there is one piece of evidence that does just that, albeit loosely. And what would that be? This symbol... Muranath, what are you doing? What's wrong? He's using his powers to suppress our connection. Magic. I can't actually see what you're trying to show me. Muranath, could you stop being petty and just let her see it? I don't take orders from you, Heavensborn. I wonder, Mr. Cuthbert, what is on that parchment? You see, Beatrice, Arya has been investigating a string of murders throughout Wyvengard. These murders appear to be unrelated, despite how gruesome they are, but they all share one thing in common. This symbol was found at each and every crime scene.
Objection!
Don't tell me my daughter's roped you into a little conspiracy theory. Your mind control defense would be laughable if it weren't downright insulting. Lord Steelwind, during the gap in Arya's memory, someone placed this mark in her pocket. It was clearly some sort of taunt from whoever orchestrated this. Nonsense! She clearly drew that symbol herself during her psychotic episode. I've had to listen to her go on and on about her insane theory. She was obsessed with it. Mr. Cuthbert, aren't you curious about what just happened? What are you talking about? Think about it. Why did... My apologies, I don't know why I said that. Ugh. Is everything okay, Beatrice? Yes, I'm perfectly fine. Anyway, it looks like you'll have to figure the rest out on your own. Figure out the rest on my own? What do you mean by that? There's nothing to figure out. Your Grace, these two are making a mockery of us by spouting these insane theories. The defense clearly has no case. End this at once. Considering what I know, I'd like to indulge this theory. What? Well, we're getting places. You've been awfully quiet for a while, Mr. Cuthbert. What are you thinking about? He's probably imagining new ways to furtively stall for time. I think I finally figured out why the witness and the defendant can't remember anything. And it would also explain why they didn't have control of their actions.
Objection!
I'm not even finished explaining yet. Let me finish before you object, please, thank you. Again with this. If you're so convinced of my daughter's conspiracy, why don't you prove it? I knew it. Even you don't believe in the nonsense you're spouting. Lord Steelwind, I want to be wrong about this. If I'm right, the implications don't bode well for anyone involved. So instead of telling you, I think it would be better to show you. Empress of Discord, wherever you may hide. Damn it. I knew you could do it. For the eye of Horus, I issue upon you a divine edict. Release thy guards and manifest your blood contract with Arya Steelwind. Yep, okay. Blood contract seems strange. Unlike Basis' contract, it's only one page, and there's a large empty space at the top half of the page. Oh. For the intentions of this contract, the person who signs the contract to Arya Steelwind will be referred to as the Patron. By signing this contract, Arya Steelwind surrenders her mind, body, and soul to the Patron. This contract will bind Arya Steelwind to the Patron as so long as they both live. It's signed with Arya's signature. Arya was in the prayer room at 2 PM. This letter was sent to Arya. And then somehow it's been overlaid with that at the bottom. Ah, because this blood contract, it's not written on anything physical. Right, so... it was all written on this piece of paper. The bottom of it was torn off at some point. But the bottom half used to have that written on it. And because only this bit is the contract, not the top bit, that's why I'm only seeing the bottom bit here. But this kind of implies... this is weird. Because that still doesn't really tell me who the patron is. And this kind of implies to me it's Celeste. No! This can't be true. This is... that isn't exactly a traditional gavel, but, well, yeah, sure. Enough! Stop prattling amongst yourself.
Objection!
No, this is a sham. This wretch has clearly created convincing fabrication. It's genuinely so. It's impossible to falsify something like this. You can't deny the truth anymore, Lord Steelwind. There is a way to control someone else's actions. Arya Steelwind wasn't affected by Mage Blight. She was controlled against her will. With this evidence, there's no doubt that Arya did sign a blood contract. But it still doesn't make sense. I agree. Even if Arya was the type of person to sign a contract with a demon, there isn't a single part of this contract that benefits her. There's a large empty space above the terms of your daughter's contract. When I issue a Divine Edict, it creates a copy of the blood contract that I call for. I think when she was given this contract, it probably looked something entirely different. Something else was written in this empty space to make it look like a normal legal document, which means that my client was not in control of her actions that day.
Objection!
Enough of this, all of you! Do you see now, Lord Steelwind? Arya was not responsible for what happened. That remains to be proven. What are you talking about? She has a blood contract that relinquishes control of her free will. Not having control and not being responsible are two very different things, Cuthbert. What? I'll admit the defendant may not have had control of her actions when she murdered the victims. However, she did have full control of herself when she signed this contract. Are you serious? No one in their right mind would willingly sign a contract like this. And what of Beatrice Frigga? Was she in her right mind when she made a contract with the demon Muraneth? If we can't hold the defendant responsible, surely we should also acquit Lady Frigga for the murder of her father? But that's hardly the same thing. I, for one, fail to see the difference. A fool made a deal with a demon, and as a result, several esteemed members of the nobility were killed. She's your daughter, Lucio. And how does that change anything? Honestly, this only places more responsibility on her for what happened. I could have accepted if she had been reckless and accidentally induced Mage Blight, but to sign a contract with a demon? That only further espouses the need to put her down. She was clearly tricked, Lucio. Is that so? As a fellow attorney, would you really sign a contract without carefully inspecting it? Whether it was through foolishness, negligence, or both, the defendant willingly signed a blood contract. She compromised herself, and as a result, 3 nobles died. The responsibility falls squarely on her. Lucio, is clearly someone else to blame for Aria's actions that day. Oh, and who would that be? I'd like to reread my client's blood contract to the court. By signing this contract, Aria Steelwind surrenders her mind, body, and soul to the patron. That can only mean one thing. Whoever this patron is, they took control of my client and used her to murder the victims. But that's right! They could still be out there! None of us are safe until this patron is apprehended! Surely we can't end this trial while every member of the Wavengard nobility is in danger. Well played. I'm compelled to agree with Mr. Cuthbert. Trickery or not, it's clear someone wished ill intent on the nobles. And until we know who this patron is, you can't pass judgment on my client. Not until we know the circumstances that she signed this blood contract under. And what would you have us do, Cuthbert? The contract has no stipulations about proximity or how this mind control works. For all we know, this patron could have murdered the victims while sitting in their very home. There was a clear intent behind this attack. Even if the patron didn't directly participate in the murders, they definitely had a motive. If Aria was being controlled, then we can analyse her behaviour to determine who was controlling her. I see. That does sound as good a plan as any. At the very least, we can't allow this patron to escape justice. Despite the questions raised, we've clearly made some headway. I believe we should take a brief recess to process these revelations. Very well. Aria, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I can't imagine what you're feeling right now. But there's still hope. If we can find out who did this to you, we can still save you. Do you remember if you've signed anything recently? No, I don't. Damn it. The patron must have wiped your memories to cover their tracks. But I still don't understand. Even if I don't remember signing that contract, I don't think I would be that careless. Right. As much as I hate to admit it, Lucio was right. You're an attorney like me, and we always carefully look over contracts before we sign them. Which raises the question of how the patron got your signature. I don't know. I just... Damn it. We don't even know what circumstances you were under when you signed that contract. For all we know, the patron could have used any number of tactics to coerce you into doing this. That's also possible. Aria... What are you doing here, Father? I can't can't believe him. Or does he have nothing to say? We should also head back, Celeste. Right. Court is now resumed. Shall we pick up where we carried off? How would you like to proceed? I think we should review what we do know about the murders. We do have a plethora of witnesses to work with. That's correct, so let's start from the beginning. It all began at noon yesterday morning. I was at my house in Rathlone with Arya and my bodyguard, Celeste. I was speaking with them when a courier suddenly delivered a letter to my home. It was from Garrick Pierce. He wanted to meet with me and Celeste at the Grand Cathedral of the Scaled Lord at 2 o'clock. To make sure we were on time, we arrived at the Grand Cathedral at 1. At the time, we didn't know that the cathedral was closed to the public, but the knights guarding the cathedral allowed us through anyway. Apparently, they were expecting us. That should not have been possible. Due to the solemnity of the situation, we were very particular about who was permitted to enter the cathedral. It's possible someone pulled some strings to let us through. Or you two entered the cathedral illegally. Well, I'm sure that knight from the King's Guard can vouch for us. I know about every order given to the King's Guard, and none of them were told to let you two through. It's possible the knight we met fell comatose like the others. And as long as they're unresponsive, we'll never know. Perhaps we should continue. We arrived at the church, and spent the next hour sightseeing before we went to meet with Pierce. In that time, we met with Remus, Lucio, Arya, Asta, and Alaric. And around that time, Arya and Asta left together to meet with the High Speaker in his quarters. While exploring the cathedral, we spoke with Von Sanctus and Sybil. Then we spoke with the 3 Frigga sisters and Eris Ilmater. Eris Ilmater. She's a friend of Beatrice Frigga. The King's Guard wouldn't let her bring her familiar into the cathedral, so she brought Eris to guide her instead. Anyway, we left the garden at around 1:45 to meet with Pierce in the prayer room. And at around the same time, Arya left her meeting with the High Speaker and felt nauseous. The last thing she remembers is looking at Lake Galacrond. A likely story. Regardless, at 2, Asta went to pay his respects to his father's body. Unbeknownst to him, a mage had placed a glyph of contingency in front of his father's coffin. It was set to trap him within a force cage. What a despicable act. Considering what followed, the attack on His Majesty must have been a diversion. Right. It was also at this time that both Beatrice and Eris went missing. Considering the timing of it all, someone must have taken control of Beatrice's body after the trap on Asta was sprung. Are you saying this patron controlled her as well? No, I don't think so. According to her contract, her mind belonged to the Empress of Discord, not the patron. Furthermore, Arya's blood contract was created by the Empress. It's clear that the patron and the Empress were in league with each other. Wonderful. Another demon we have to worry about. Well, the patron and the Empress had all the pieces they needed. That's when they began the massacre. The patron took control of Arya's body and used her to murder Von Sanctus at 2:05. Presumably Arya started a fire in the common room around this time, and since Von Sanctus's body was found there, that must have been after she murdered him. Shortly thereafter, Prince Alaric spotted smoke from the fire and asked Arya what was going on. Arya responded by using an unknown transmutation spell to incapacitate him. To think they would use her to attack the prince as well. Luckily, the effects of that spell were only temporary, and Alaric came out unharmed. After that, the patron used Arya to murder Sybil at 2:15 PM. She brought Sybil's body to the westward balcony, where she dumped it into Lake Galacrond. High Speaker Arceus witnessed this, but he wasn't aware of what she had thrown off the balcony until much later. The High Speaker thought this encounter strange, but he continued with his business. He headed to the prayer room, but was turned away by the knight standing guard there. Meanwhile, Celeste and I were talking to Lord Pierce. When we showed up for the meeting earlier, he was clearly expecting somebody else to show up. We tried to get to the bottom of what was happening, but he refused to answer our questions. And at about 2:20, we heard a commotion outside. Celeste went to investigate. And that's when Celeste fought Arya. The patron's target was Garrick Pierce, but Celeste was too powerful to neutralise. They fought each other for about 15 minutes before Arya was finally able to push past her. During their fight, the Empress sent Beatrice into the prayer room. She probably made Beatrice invisible to move undetected. She then used her to cast a sleep spell on Pierce and I to knock us out. I remember checking the time close to when this happened. This must have happened at 2:30. If your testimony is correct, Beatrice Frigga was actively used in this plan. Yes, and considering how quickly the massacre unfolded, the Empress must have coordinated with the patron. They probably planned how they would use Beatrice and Arya to carry out the murders. After Beatrice knocked us out, Arya finally pushed past Celeste and into the prayer room. And before Celeste could chase after her, she had already murdered Pierce. Arya and I were unconscious by the time Celeste entered the room. The patron had already achieved their goal of murdering the three nobles, so she probably fell unconscious after they released their control over her. Arya and I regained consciousness shortly thereafter. That's when the Inquisition arrested her for the murders. Lord Pierce was one of the victims. Your meeting clearly had more significance than I'd realised. So tell us, Cuthbert, what was your discussion about? It's fine, you can tell them. Alright, as long as it's okay with you. For the past few months, Celeste and I have been investigating who her birth parents are. I recall receiving many complaints about her during the Lord's Ball. Supposedly, Garrick Pierce had the information we are seeking. That letter he sent us said he wanted to trade this information for his freedom. I assumed this meant he wanted me to be his attorney. Do you honestly expect us to believe that? Why would he ask for help from the attorney who indicted him in the first place? We thought the same thing. And when we arrived for the meeting, it was clear I wasn't the intended recipient. This means that Pierce sent that letter to someone else. You better not be lying to us, Cuthbert. Frankly, I don't much care if you believe me. Regardless, if we examine every action Arya took, we can build up a psychological profile of the patron. I will give you that. To begin, the defense would like to call the Inquisition commander to the stand. Oh good. My throat. His testimony might shed some light on how Von Sanctus and Sybil died. Despite all these witnesses' accounts, we still only know how Pierce was murdered. Yes, he was impaled using a blade magically frozen from his own blood. Indeed. Anyway, we need to find out exactly how Arya murdered Von Sanctus and Sybil. The massacre was swift and efficient. It must have required a lot of forethought and coordination. If we figured out who might have had this knowledge, we might be able to find out who did this. I see. It sounds as good a plan as any. Kingsguard, escort Commander Urim White to the witness stand. Witness, please state your name and occupation. Right, Commander? I'm sorry, I just can't do this. How am I supposed to act like this is normal? A giant lizard is standing right behind me. Calling me a lizard is highly offensive, Commander. Sorry, your scaled lordship. Sir. Commander, just try your best to testify about what happened. Yeah. I would imagine it would be pretty distracting, yeah. It all started when we received a report from the King's Guard. The prosecutor attacked Prince Alaric and a fire had broken out in the common room. We weren't sure what the deal with the Steelwind was, so we went to the common room to put out the fire. But when we got there, we noticed a bunch of unconscious knights in front of the prayer room. We went to the prayer room. That's when we found Steelwind and Cuthbert unconscious next to Pierce's dead body. We later found the bodies of Von Sanctus and Sybil too. That's when we realised she offed all three of them. So you still have no idea how Steelwind was used to murder Von Sanctus or Sybil? Not a clue. It's especially worse for Von Sanctus. That fire burned a lot of the physical evidence off of his body. What about Sybil? Was there any physical evidence on her body? No idea about that either. She didn't have any wounds. All we know is that she died of suffocation. Huh. Well, let's press some stuff. And this is mainly based off Prince Alaric's testimony, am I correct? Yeah, we still have no idea which transmutation spell she hit him with. Judging from the time of the report, this must have been well after all three of the murders occurred. Yeah, it was unfortunate how that played out. If Steelwind really was controlled, whoever controlled her knew how to get the job done quick. Went to the common room to put out the fire. Was that wise? Regardless of who it was, someone assaulted a Prince of Wyvengard. We were already dealing with a king who was trapped in that forced cage. Honestly, a lot happened in that hour, and most of our attention was focused on keeping the royal family safe. We could already conclude that the attack on the king was a distraction. Whoever orchestrated this must have known would focus our attention on keeping the royal family safe. What did you do when you arrived at the common room, Commander? Bunch of unconscious knights in the prayer room. Did you see Arya or Celeste? No, we only saw the aftermath of their fight. There were marks and craters everywhere in that hallway. Guess they probably did fight then. Pierce's time of death was 2:45, and the knights didn't arrive at the common room until 3:10. They didn't arrive at the prayer room until well after that battle had taken place. Wait, wouldn't that mean you were in that room with Pierce's body for 25 minutes? Why didn't you look for help? Yet you weren't waking up for some reason, so I kept channeling my healing magic into you. Looking back, I probably should have just looked for help. But even if Arya was unconscious, I didn't want to leave you alone in that room with her. Right. Sorry. Prayer room. Unconscious people. Judging from the timing, this would have been several minutes after he had already died. Yeah, and we had no idea what was going on. Pierce was already dead, you and Steelwind were unresponsive. I can see why I'd be unresponsive. I was hit with a spell specifically designed to make people sleep. But why would Arya be unresponsive too? We have no idea. We never even heard of demonic possession until today. For all we know, it could have all been a side effect of being controlled for over an hour. Off to all three of them. Well, let's just go top down. Could you elaborate more on Von Sanctus's murder? Was there any evidence that implied how he died? Like I said, it's trickier with Von Sanctus because the fire partially burned his body. And our divination magic could only tell that he died of suffocation. I see. So there's no other physical evidence. Well, there is one thing. From his burn marks, we do know that he was hit with a firebolt before he died. We're guessing she wanted to weaken him before she dealt the final blow. So he took a direct attack from her before he died. Please add this to your testimony, Commander White. Sure, whatever you say, kid. She must have hit him with a firebolt to keep him from running away. I don't think there's anything much wrong with that. Collides with something, sets things ablaze, fire projectile, it travels a long way, much bigger than that room was. It is a thing that Arya knows how to do. Right, Firebolt is in her spell compendium, and Von Sanctus wasn't exactly a fighter after all. Yeah, the poor sap didn't have a chance. He must have been in immense pain from that attack. Doopy 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 doo. Oh, this is different dialogue, actually. And due to the lack of physical evidence, you're not sure what she used. Von Sanctus and Sybil both died of suffocation. We can probably assume that the patron used the same method to murder both of them. Well, you know what they say about assuming. Don't be cute, Cuthbert. He can't help it. What? What? Anyway. Could you elaborate more on Sybil's murder? Was there any evidence that implied how she died? Using our divination magic, we know she died of suffocation, but we're not exactly sure how. But unlike Von Sanctus, Sybil's body wasn't burned. Shouldn't there have been wounds around her neck if she was suffocated? Well, we found traces of necromancy on Sybil. We think Steelwind cast mend wounds on her body after she offed her. This would have removed any wounds on the body. It's exactly like what happened with Katharina Bellwether. Yeah, the only wounds she has are from the impact of falling into Lake Galacrond. Add this to your testimony. Must have dumped her body from the balcony. How do you know her body was there anyway? When bodies started dropping, we noticed that she was nowhere to be found. One of the King's Guard cast Locate Creature and realised she was somewhere in the lake. Clever, clever. Took us an hour before we finally fished her out. Based on the High Speaker's testimony, she was dead long before that. Tied Sybil somewhere close to the balcony and suffocated her somehow. And since someone cast mend wounds on the body, we still don't know how. Yeah, it's gonna be a real headache figuring that out. Could you elaborate more on Pierce's murder? Was there any evidence that implied how he died? Well, that one is simple. McCoy chased Steelwind into the prayer room but didn't arrive fast enough. When she got there, Pierce was already dead. He was killed using a blade magically formed from his own blood. But why would she do something like that? When he murdered Flintheart McCoy, he only used shaped liquid to avoid leaving behind any evidence. I doubt the patron would make Steelwind do the same thing. Their intent was to pin the crime on her. We think she knew McCoy was on her tail. She didn't have enough time to suffocate him as she did with Von Sanctus and Sybil. And she didn't have any weapons on her. She must have had to improvise. But she has other spells that could have done the job. She could have hit him with a Steelwind strike. I know from experience that she is terrible at controlling that spell. It's possible she didn't want to unleash such a powerful spell in a closed room. Anyway, the other two murders were really well planned. Pierce's murder was the only one that required improvisation. It's possible the patron severely underestimated McCoy's combat capabilities. She fought my daughter for almost half an hour. Meanwhile, the other two murders occurred within quick succession of one another. Yeah, I see what you mean. Please add this to your testimony, Commander White. Sure, whatever you say, kid. Well, she does know Mend Wounds, Firebolt, and Shape Liquid. Which is strangely similar to how he murdered Flynhart McCoy. Lord Pierce was one of the targets of the patron. It's likely they knew about what happened during McCoy's trials and drew inspiration from that. Still though, it seems awfully creative for something that they came up with in that moment. Well, don't the legends say that demons engage in contrapasso? Say what now? Some people believe that when souls are sent to hell, they're punished in a way that relates to their sins. In Pierce's case, he committed murder with a frozen blade. It's possible this Empress wanted the patron to murder him the same way. Out of all the murders, Pierce is the one we have the most information about. Yeah, from what it sounds, this patron wasn't planning to let McCoy live. That drawn-out fight must have really thrown a wrench into their plans. I find that a little strange, though. How so? My daughter is a worthless soldier. She's no talent for combat. And I have experienced McCoy's battle prowess firsthand. As much as I hate to admit it, McCoy should have easily overcome her in an even fight. It was her magic that was the problem. But I had no idea what kind of spells she could throw at me, so I had to be careful. And, despite everything, I really didn't want to hurt her. That kindness could be the death of you, McCoy.
Objection!
What am I going with here? My only thought here is Force Cage. If I can find it in my giant list of magical spells. Yeah. It feels like... From the fact he was able to use Force Cage and the square around his body, that he used Force Cage, which would have prevented any further fireballs from hitting him. Still not 100% sure where we're going with this, but we're going somewhere. What is it now? Commander White, you said that Stillwind attacked Von Sanctus with a firebolt before she suffocated him. Yeah, she probably wanted to injure him so he'd be easier to subdue. But that's what I find strange. Von Sanctus knew he was under attack. So wouldn't he have cast Force Cage to repel her? I guess that's true. Von Sanctus was hardly a warrior, Cuthbert. Force Cage is an extremely useful spell, but it has to be aimed. He was hit with a firebolt and he must have been in immense pain. I doubt he'd be able to think clearly under those circumstances. I'd normally agree with you, but the crime scene tells another story. What do you mean, Mr. Cuthbert? When we investigated the crime scene, we found traces of aggregation magic that formed a perfect square around the body. I'm sure if we measured the dimensions of that square, it would be 10 foot by 10 foot. Which is the same length and width as the cube created by Force Cage. Like you said, he was in no shape to aim it. So, he cast Force Cage on himself to create the makeshift barrier.
Objection!
Nonsense! If Von Sanctus had cast Force Cage on himself, he would have been protected from further harm. The defendant would have been able to suffocate him after that. Perhaps there's some way to bypass Force Cage. And once again, your ignorance of the arcane arts is made apparent. Force Cage is one of the most powerful abjuration spells in existence. It can't be dispelled and no one could teleport into nor out of it. Right, Aster was also trapped in the Force Cage, and he had to wait for the hour duration to elapse. So how did Steelwind suffocate him? Hold on. If Force Cage is a perfectly closed space, is it possible that he ran out of air? That would be a glaring weakness. House Von Sanctus obviously designed that spell to allow oxygen through the barrier. And before you ask, poisonous gases can't be pushed through the barrier either. Only oxygen can travel through it. Right. And even if they had used poisonous gas, the autopsy report wouldn't have said he suffocated. I think I know this one. Force Cage is specifically designed to allow oxygen through its barrier, but what if there was no oxygen left in the room? No oxygen? Ah, I see. It was the fire in the common room. The patron knew Arya couldn't harm Von Sanctus once he was in that Force Cage. So she started a fire to eat all the oxygen within the room. What should have protected him ended up trapping him, and the inability to dispel it ended up sealing his fate. Well, I suppose that explains how the defendant murdered Von Sanctus. But with that in mind, a lot of this plan sounds like it was improvised in the moment. Just like the murder of Pierce. And not only that, we assume the patron used the same method to kill both Lord Von Sanctus and Lady Sybil. But I doubt Lady Sybil died under the same circumstances. Correct, there was only one fire. And if Sybil was in that Force Cage, the defendant would have been able to throw her body into Lake Galacrond. Which means Sybil must have died by asphyxiation elsewhere. Then it's clear our next course of action is to determine how Lady Sybil was murdered. But we still don't know where she was murdered. And the only witness who saw her around this time was the High Speaker. Which was after the defendant disposed of Sybil's body. Well, the High Speaker's testimony is as good a start as any. For our next witness, the defense would like to call High Speaker Theon Arceus to the stand. What's wrong? It's nothing. Please carry on. Kingsguard, escort High Speaker Arceus to the witness stand.